I'm getting called out on this because I called Donald Trump a wannabe dictator. It's because he is. It's because he is. Oh. The governor's being mean, and the governor's speaking out on that. Well, maybe it's time for us to be a little meaner.
That is Democrat Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota. He was Kamala Harris's running mate to be vice president of the United States, and I think he's a terrorist baby killer, isn't he? He's he's a terrorist and a baby killer. And he loves communist China. How many trips did he make to communist China on his own? Scores of communist Chinese trips. The communist Chinese love Tim Walz. And a very good Monday to you following our 4th of July weekend. A great weekend for my best girl and myself on the eastern shore of the Chesapeake Bay in the state of Maryland. Nice place. Wonderful weekend, a long weekend, a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday weekend for us. Quite rare for us, I've got to say. And a wonderful 4th of July weekend. Glad to be back. Now, the world has continued to go mad, and I want to get to the horrible, terrible flood in Texas, in Kerr County and Kerrville, Texas, where now the official body count is at least 82 people killed. Just extraordinary, and about 40 still unaccounted for. Truly horrible thing. At least 28 children, primarily from a girls' camp along a river there. And the stories are unbelievable. I'll share that with you coming up. Now, we just played a little Tim Walz, and he's a real piece of work. And he is a wannabe dictator, this rhetoric. And the Democrats literally kill more than 1 million babies in a year, and they give out awards for it. They call it choice. And you might get a Margaret Sanger Award. Although I think they haven't been giving out the Margaret Sanger Award lately, for maybe because of the Wuhan or something like that. Would have been in poor taste during the Wuhan with all the people dying and everything. But Hillary Clinton has her Margaret Sanger Award, and Hanoi Jane Fonda, who loves communism, has her Margaret Sanger Award as well. Now, the Tim Walz story, a week to 2 weeks ago, Tim Walz was at a speaking event where he came out very proudly talking about his communist Chinese friends, the communists who have murdered more people in communist China alone than any group of murderers in the history of the world since the 1949 Maoist revolution. They've murdered at least 50 million of their own people, perhaps up to 75 million of their own people. But the communist Tim Walz, when is this from? June 13th. Tim Walz stuns critics by calling China the world's, quote, moral authority, end quote, amid rising tensions over Iran. That's not important now. Town Hall had the story at the time, and this is what Democrat Governor Tim Walz, Kamala's running mate, would be vice president, second gentleman. He would be the first gentleman. He'd be the vice president. Yeah, because he's not married to anybody. His wife loves the smell of burning Minneapolis. They're going to bottle of cologne, Minneapolis burning. You can spray it on yourself. Here's Tim Walz loving communist China.
Who is the voice in the world that can negotiate some type of agreement in this? Who holds the moral authority? Who holds the ability to do that? Because we are not seen as a neutral actor. Now I ask who that is. And I mean, consistently over and over again, we're going to have to face the reality. It might be the Chinese.
There's the communist Chinese loving Tim Walz, Democrat governor, Minneapolis, Kamala Harris's running mate. He's, I still like to think of him as the second gentleman because he's a little puppy. So here, the moral authority, communist China, which has, slave camps where they make your Nike shoes so that LeBron James can fly in his private jet and pay for the fuel himself, thanks to the worn little fingers of child slave laborers in some hellhole in communist China. You have the Uyghurs that are being abused by the hundreds of thousands. They're enslaved in China, where they literally will pull an organ out of somebody to give the organ to a Communist Party leader to save the leader's life and kill the subject in China. Slavery and indentured servitude and by race and by ethnicity and by religious group like the Uyghurs. The Chinese, they have the moral authority, and they could resolve the situation with Iran because we don't have that moral authority. China does, according to Tim Filthy Maroon Walls. Now, why did I think of that today? I thought of that today because I got my Washington Post, and today's Washington Post, the front page, just below the fold, influencers cast Russia as haven of morality. I'm sorry, what? In a brightly lit conference room of a Moscow police department, where else would you go? A smiling officer flanked by Russian flags and gilded double-headed eagles handed over a small blue booklet to an American family of 5. Asylum certificates granting them the right to live and work in Russia after fleeing Texas because they felt their way of life was under threat. So naturally, you move to Putin's communist China, so they're lefties. I'll bet $1 they came from Austin, Texas. And the Washington Post puts them on the front page because they're fleeing Texas. They hate Texas because it's Republican, and the Washington Post is Democrat. And here goes just they felt like their way of life was under threat in Texas, so naturally they fled to Moscow, which is led by a communist named Vlad the Impaler Putin. And the Washington Post continues, I feel like I've been put on an ark of safety for my family, 61-year-old Leo Hare said at the time. I want to thank President Putin for allowing Russia to become a good place for families in this world climate. He sounds like a Democrat just from that. In a small way, I feel like I just got married to Russia, echoed his wife, Chantel Hare, 51 years old as well. He's 61, she's 51. I look forward to building a future here with my family. I look forward to the opportunities that my sons will have here. And this is on the front page of the Washington Post. They're doing it with a straight face. Footage of the ceremony, shared on the Interior Ministry's official media channels, was accompanied by a caption declaring, yet another American family chooses our country. That's right, our country. That's Russia, because it's an official Russian website. And yet another American family. So how many Democrats are fleeing to Russia anyway to get away from Texas, of all places, because their family values, Yeah, to let our family and understanding that in our country, traditional values are protected by the state. What? That's what the Russian website says. Their traditional values are protected by the state. And the Hare family thinks that's a great idea. Leo and Chantel Hare, they've fled to Russia, and they couldn't be more excited. The Hare family, devout Christians. Sure they are. That's why they're moving to communist, godless Russia, where they closed down all the churches. Who ran a farm in Texas, described themselves as a family of moral immigrants. Right. And have emerged as the face of a small but growing trend of Westerners relocating to Russia in search of the traditional conservative values they feel are eroding in the liberal West. Wow. So a communist, dictator, thug, murderer running Russia becomes your alternative because the moral values of the West don't fight for moral values in the West. Just give up completely, move to Russia, praise Vladimir Putin. Isn't that amazing? Their journey reflects the ideological narrative, an ideological narrative they're calling it. Putin has spent years crafting Russia as the guardian of family-centered traditions amid a Western world spiraling into moral and social decay. Well, parts of that, this is the important thing about effective propaganda. Parts of it are true. Now, it's the Democrat Party that has been driving the moral and social decay in the United States and more broadly in the West. It's liberals, Western Europe and the United States, America, people that self-describe as liberals, the moral decay. They're the ones that attack you if you go to church, if you believe in the nuclear family, that is a man as father, a woman as mother, children as children, a family, a nuclear family, not the kind that you find at Chernobyl, but, the more traditional nuclear family. Isn't it amazing? So the Washington Post, and they've got pictures of these dumb people, just amazing. Womp, womp, womp. And here's a couple from the UK, but she's originally Russian, and they moved back to Russia. Her husband is British, and they moved back, and they've got pictures of people looking happy in Russia, and a picture of bananas and oranges. Oh, and the food is so abundant, comrade. We have more food than Texas. And this is literally, the left has done this to the United States. They've been trying to create this failing West, failing United States, failing capitalism. They've been trying to create it for decades now, and they've been working hard at it. Now they've won over some followers. Of course, they won over more than 900 followers to Jonestown to go drink the Kool-Aid and commit suicide and pile your body on top of the bodies next to you. They were socialists. They were communists. They were the dream coming true for them. And now the Democrats have elected a communist as the mayoral primary, the Democratic primary in New York City, and they've got him. They love the jihad against the Jews, global intifada. They're anti-capitalist, anti-billionaire. The Democrat Party is closer to Vladimir Putin today, certainly than they are to Donald Trump, who's a capitalist from New York. Yeah. Stories of foreigners moving to Russia in pursuit of these values get extensive coverage on Russian state media and are woven into the broader narrative Moscow now exports internationally. Oh, Russia, so nice. United States, so bad. Comrade, move it to Russia. Join the revolution. And at the same time, the Democrat Party is really the Communist Party of the United States of America. Just look at their mayoral candidate in New York, who is an America-hating, capitalism-hating, Jew-hating, genocidal Jew-hater, modern Nazi, fascist, and won the young vote in New York City overwhelmingly. Gen Z and Gen this and Gen that, and they're all voting for the communist who wants to exterminate the Jews with a global intifada. Yeah, so the Washington Post today, with influencers cast Russia as haven of morality, nothing could be more ironic. Anti-woke visa aims to draw those fearing a moral decline in the West. And see how they muddy the waters, thinking if you're anti-woke, you're Republican, you're conservative, and you're the one moving to Putin's communist Russia, because remember the phony story about Russian collusion and Donald Trump. And it goes, interestingly, the same word, morality, with Tim Walz talking about communist China, the other major communist country regime on the planet Earth, as China as the moral authority amid rising tensions over Iran. So the Democrat Party, they're just completely out of the closet, and they're dressed up like communists. They sound like communists. They swim like communists. They quack like communists. I think they might be communist ducks. Aren't they amazing? And that's our media. They're part of the problem, a big, big part of the problem. You know, big wireless companies are pulling one over on all of us. It's time to switch to consumer cellular. I switched to consumer cellular. I get the same fast, reliable, nationwide big wireless coverage without the big wireless cost, the money. But it's not just about saving money on your bill. It's also about not being used and abused by these big phone companies. Do you even know how much data you use every month? Do you know that most people over 50 years of age use less than 8 gigs of data every month, but Big Wireless, they shove you into an unlimited plan because they need you to pay for it to cover the cost of younger people who use 10 times as much data as you use. Yeah, if you're not using all that data, then you are being used and abused. I haven't had enough of that. And listen, I went over to Consumer Cellular. Consumer Cellular set me up with a service and a phone, greatest phone ever, greatest camera ever. And it's incredibly easy to switch. All you have to do is make a phone call, on your phone. Speak to an actual person, not a robot, based right here in the United States, not in Sri Lanka. And real human beings, incredibly helpful people. It only takes about 20 minutes, going to save you a lot of money, make your life easier. So give them a call today and make the switch to 1-800-760-0702. That's 800-760-0702. Yes, sir. Yeah, the left is really here. And now, Democrat members of Congress are being told there needs to be blood and that they have to be willing to get shot. They have to be willing to get shot, the Democrat Party, because they're not on our side.
Do you like capitalism?
No, I have many critiques of capitalism.
Chris here with a list of things that none of us should trust. The Washington Post, the New York Times, anything on CNN. Here's a list of things that I do trust. The Washington Times. Support real journalism for just $1 a week at washingtontimes.com/Chris. Last week on Twitter, which you might call X, we asked you, our beloved listeners, in a poll, is today's Democrat Party more like the Soviet Union or ISIS? An important question, I think, is the Democrat Party more like the Soviet Union or ISIS? I'll share with you the results in a minute to that fun poll. Right now, let's go to the telephones. Let's go to Pauline, calling from Montgomery County, Maryland. Pauline, you're on the Chris Plant Show.
Yes, Chris, thank you very much for having me.
You betcha.
I want to say I'm from Guyana, South America. I've been here 50 years now. And I've never seen anything worse than what I've seen with the Democrats. I mean, if they want to move to Russia, let them all go. And those who violating the law, put them in alligator Alcatraz. Here's why I want them. It's disgusting. I just can't take it. I can't take the things that is happening. President Trump has been doing his best. No matter what he do, they're condemning him. They're a bunch of ungodly heathens. I can't take that. They need to do something about the people, those that violating the law. I mean, you know, I've been here. I worked 23 years and served as a correctional officer. And I just I'm 79 and I retired at 76 years old.
Wow. God bless you. You're amazing. That's right. We took a poll on our Twitter last week, and the question is: today's Democrat Party more like the Soviet Union or ISIS? This sounds like a prank question, but if you think about it now and then over the next couple of days when you're driving and when you're making a sandwich and stuff. Is the Democrat Party today more like the Soviet Union, or are they more like ISIS? And the poll results are this. 46% of respondents said the Democrat Party today is more like the Soviet Union than the Democrat Party is like ISIS. But a majority, 54%, said that the Democrat Party is more like ISIS than they are like the Soviet Union. Because they're not as organized as the Soviet Union, you know. They don't build a military as strong as the Soviet Union. They weaken our military because they want to be run over in the 21st century in ways that we never could have been in the 20th century. because they're not on our side. So a majority, 54%, said the Democratic Party is more like ISIS than they are like the Soviet Union. And 46%, a solid showing for the Soviet Union, 46% saying, no, the Democrats are more like the Soviet Union than they are like ISIS. But they're mad, they're nuts, they're violent, they're criminally insane. They violently attack their political enemies. They're the Democrat Party, and they're not on our side. Now, I got to say, our last caller, Pauline, I'm sorry that the clock ran out on me there, but a wonderful woman, a great American, originally from Guyana in South America, and I actually had to push a button and sneeze there. I had a surprise sneeze there. Hiya, hi karate. But nice lady, Pauline, worked as a corrections officer and now just barely retired. Wonderful stuff. I wanted to apologize for Jonestown. I didn't get a minute because the Democrats sent a bunch of Americans down to Guyana from San Francisco and the Oakland Bay Area, and they went there into the jungles, and then 900 of them drank the Kool-Aid, and everybody died. Kind of a bad moment for Guyana. Don't know any other bad stories about Guyana, do you? Just the one that the left, and they were socialists. They were building a socialist utopia in Guyana. But that's not important now. Let's get back to crazy Democrats, because this amazing story today, I've got to say, that there needs to be blood is the headline in Axios. Democrats voters tell them to get shot in Trump resistance push. And we've already had how many elected Democrats, members of the House, Democrat mayor of Newark, New Jersey, violently attacking ICE facilities. And then today we learned the story of the ICE facility in Texas being attacked by at least a dozen armed men in uniform with body armor. And what is it, 8 of them arrested? Aren't they amazing? And that means 4 of them got away, at least 4 of them got away, right? Because the Democrats told to get shot by their own voters, which might be understandable, for the anti-Trump resistance, because the Democrat Party is criminally insane. Are they? And they're violent. Are they more like ISIS or more like the Soviet Union? You be the judge. Honestly, one of the things that doesn't get nearly enough attention is the fact that the Democrats have shot and killed 3 American presidents who were all Republicans, of course, and 3 Democrat presidents assassinated out of 4 were Republicans assassinated by Democrats. All right? The 4th president assassinated was John F. Kennedy, who was shot and killed by a communist. Speaking of which, there is more CIA news from over the weekend as well, speaking of John F. Kennedy. But I was thinking about that. There are 3 Americans. Abraham Lincoln, the first Republican president ever, was shot and killed. Yeah, that was in 1865, as you may know. Then James Garfield, a Republican president, in 1881. That's not much longer, not much later. What is that, 65, 75? So like 16 years later, right? James Garfield, a Republican, is shot and killed. And then in 1901, 20 years after that, William McKinley, a Republican, is shot and killed by a Democrat. One of them was an anarchist, but that's a Democrat. Then John F. Kennedy was shot and killed, but 1963. But that was by a communist. Then, of course, Ronald Reagan was shot in 1981, and Gerald Ford was shot at twice, and Donald Trump was shot by a Democrat. And then the Democrats lie about everything. But with that in mind, there was an amazing story that popped over the weekend. And again, I was gone on Thursday and Friday because my best girl and I were at a great town on the Eastern Shore. And the nice people on the Eastern Shore said, when you go back to Washington, please don't talk about how nice it is here on the radio, because we don't want any more Washington people coming here. And I said, well, that's very understandable. And so I'm fine with that. Now, with that in mind, here's the story that broke over the weekend. And again, Axios has the story. CIA, that they're just going to keep taking a beating until CIA admits shadowy officer monitored Lee Harvey Oswald before John F. Kennedy assassination, new records reveal. See, Lee Harvey Oswald shouted famously, "I'm a patsy." And then he was shot and killed by Jack Ruby, who was hanging out with Democrats who were gangsters and things. But never mind that. See, Lee Harvey Oswald, a communist who served in the Marine Corps, learned to shoot, and then he went to Russia where he met his wife, who is his widow now, still alive and well and living in the United States, as are Lee Harvey Oswald's two children and his Soviet wife, Marina, who was from Severodvinsk on the White Sea up north, a city that I've actually been to. But that's not important now. Now, the story at Axios, CIA admits shadowy officer monitored Oswald before JFK assassination, new records reveal. Wait a minute, didn't we have an investigation into the Kennedy assassination, and we didn't find that the CIA had been in touch with Lee Harvey Oswald beforehand, and then he shouted, "I'm a patsy"? Unbelievable. Lee Harvey.
Come on, man. No, they're taking me in because of the fact that I lived in the Soviet Union. I'm just a patsy.
I'm just a patsy. Now, for the first time, Axios reporting over the weekend, for the first time since President Kennedy's assassination nearly 62 years ago, the CIA has tacitly admitted that an officer specializing in psychological warfare ran an operation that came into contact with Lee Harvey Oswald before the Dallas killing. And, here's the thing about the CIA. I covered the CIA for 10 years when I was in a previous iteration of my life. My office was in the Pentagon for 10 years. I just went to work there every day, and I covered the military and the intelligence community. And why is it that nearly 62 years later, we had the church committee that looked into corruption at the CIA and all that good stuff? We had the obviously the investigation into the Kennedy assassination, and then investigation after investigation after investigation. And 62 years later, I can talk, we learned for the first time that the CIA has now admitted, and documents show, that a guy specializing in psychological warfare operations somehow was hanging out with Lee Harvey Oswald before John F. Kennedy was assassinated. Now, the disclosure, which happened on Thursday, and again, I apologize, I was off on Thursday and Friday, nestled in a batch of 40 documents concerning the CIA officer George Johannides, I'm going to go with Johannides, indicates the CIA lied for decades about his role in the Kennedy case before and after the assassination, according to experts on the JFK slaying. The linchpin document, a January 17, 1963 CIA memo showing Johannides was directed to have an alias and fake driver's license bearing the name Howard Gebler. Howard Gebler. That's not a very good name, Gebler. Until Thursday, the agency had denied that Johannides was known as Howard. But now we know that he was, and the CIA has been lying for decades. The case officer named for the CIA contact who worked with activists from an anti-communist group opposed to Cuban dictator Fidel Castro, called the Cuban Students Directorate. Who calls an organization the Cuban Students Directorate? For decades, the CIA also falsely said it had nothing to do with the student group, which was instrumental in having Oswald's pro-Castro stances published soon after the shooting. So the cover story for Ioannidis is officially dead, said Jefferson Morley, an author and expert on the Kennedy assassination. This is a big deal. The CIA is changing its tune on Lee Harvey Oswald. Only all these years later. And were we supposed to have all the documents released, and then they were kind of released, and nobody in the news media paid any attention to it? Kind of fascinating. The information comes to light as part of President Trump's order that the government meet its obligation to disclose all documents under the JFK Records Act of 1992. You see, Congress in 1992 ordered the CIA, and they can do that, to release all their documents having to do with the Kennedy assassination, and they didn't. Now, 1992, let's see, 02, 12, 22, so that's 30-some-odd years ago, and the CIA still has not released the documents, and President Trump is forcing them to release documents. And what are we learning? Well, that the CIA had a guy, and their guy was in contact with Lee Harvey Oswald. And what was he specializing in? Well, he specialized in psychological warfare, and he ran an operation for the CIA. And, hey, I got this guy, Lee Harvey Oswald, who's married to a Soviet woman. Isn't that amazing? And decades later, just amazing stuff. Jefferson Morley, an author and expert, says this, the cover story, the CIA cover story for this guy who he knows all about, Ioannidis, officially dead, says Jefferson Morley. The information is only made public because of President Trump ordering it to happen. Little, just amazing, amazing things here. So, little was known of Ioannidis' involvement in the case until disclosure in 1998 under the Records Act. New disclosures of previously hidden records kept adding slices of information to the story. Now, Ioannidis was the deputy chief of the CIA's Miami branch, overseeing all aspects of political action and psychological warfare that included covertly funding and directing the Cuban student group, commonly referred to as DRE for its Spanish language initials. Isn't this amazing? I'm a patsy. And then he's shot to death, never to speak again. And our government, this is our government. And how many decades later, and all the CIA people involved in yada, yada? My Uncle Tony was a career CIA person, a Naval Academy grad, Naval Intelligence, Vietnam, then career CIA, Latin America. And he had many, many interesting. When I was a teenager, he got me a job on a freight ship in the Gulf of Mexico when I was forced to leave Chicago. 17 years old, chipping paint on a freight ship in the Gulf of Mexico. I was the only native English speaker on the ship, and Uncle Tony, he got me the job. He had a lot of ties. All right, so we got that going for us. And this is an amazing story, the CIA story on the John F. Kennedy assassination and the contact that they had with Lee Harvey Oswald. I suspect this is still not all of it. But Trump is making sure that these documents are coming out. The rest of the news media will completely ignore it because they protect the bureaucracy. Are we more like the Soviet Union or like ISIS? You know, with the Democrats and the deep state and all of that. There is more on the CIA today, too. You know, this country was built on hard work, and smart people built this country, too. Whether you're standing for long hours, running errands all day, just doing your part to keep the world turning, You shouldn't have to deal with fatigue and foot pain and ankle pain. And that is where G-Defy shoes come in. G-Defy shoes are built with a patented VersaShock technology. The Federal Trade Commission has authorized G-Defy to tell you that these shoes do help to relieve minor occasional pain associated with walking, running, and prolonged periods of standing. G-Defy shoes help to absorb harmful shock. They align your body, improve your biomechanics, and that's good, and return energy with every step that you take. My best girl and I have told you, we've got G-Defy shoes they sent us. They're wonderful. They make your arches feel great after hiking, just great. Get 50% off right now, any order of $120 or more, by texting Chris to 91888. Or you can go to Al Gore's Amazing Internet to gdefy.com and use the code Chris there. That's right. With G-Defy's 60-day risk-free trial, you've got nothing to lose and everything to gain. Message and data rates may apply. Yeah, hey, wait a minute. Oh, did we forget to mention for 62 years that we had our guy in Miami? He was in bed with Lee Harvey Oswald. Well, it's just coming out now.
I'm just a patsy.
All right. CIA John F. Kennedy assassination. Let's go to the telephones, Michael. Let's go to Tom calling from the Empire State, the state of New York. Tom, you're on the Chris Plant Show.
Hey, Chris, great to talk to you, man. Every day I get my dose of 3 L's from you, which is listening, learning, and laughing. So this is great for me to be able to bring something to you.
Thank you.
Just as a side note, Allen Dulles was the head of the CIA under the beginning of the Kennedy administration, and they were doing things Kennedy and his brother didn't like assassinating Diem in Vietnam, going after the president of France, de Gaulle, and, of course, the Bay of Pigs. So that was a good reason for them to fire him. So they fired Allen Dulles. But LBJ put him on the Warren Commission. And on the Warren Commission, he was the fox in the henhouse, making sure that nothing that would ever sully the reputation of the CIA was allowed in as evidence, or anything that could cross-connect to anything other than lone nut, free shots, yada, yada.
Right. You put that beautifully, Tom. You put it eloquently and, dare I say, articulately.
I learned from you, Chris. I learned from you. Be short.
Well, you learned very well, and it's all true. He was on the Warren Commission. The Warren Commission came up with nothing. The Church Committee came up with nothing.